For nearly 3 years, Nate and I have released podcast episodes week after week after week. And while the podcast has helped thousands of owners, we want to go a level deeper and offer a greater level of support to our listeners. Our goal has always been to help you escape the trap that befalls most music school owners, namely that owners who decide to scale their music business often make less income than they did when they were teaching alone. And unfortunately, they often spend more time on their business to generate that smaller return. Nate, why do you think that is?
I know why that is, Daniel, because we experienced this when we began Brooklyn Music Factory 15 years ago. They're just huge mistakes that we both made when scaling up. Even with all of the information available to our industry, so many owners that you and I personally have coached are making those mistakes too.
And that can lead to all kinds of problems when trying to scale a music school.
Like?
Well, how much time do you have? We've done about 120 or 130 episodes on this. Things like low retention, difficulty in finding committed teachers, frequent staff turnover, low or no margins, a feeling of constant overwhelm, confusion about what actions to take on a day-by-day basis, focused, ineffective marketing, long hours and still not enough time to get everything done, or returns, no cash during the summer. I could just go on and on, Nate.
Yeah, I know you could. That list hurts, but I have great news. Something big is coming, Daniel, because on November 1st of this year, we are going to launch the Founders Forum. So if you suffer from some, most, or all of those problems that Daniel just listed, then we got great news for you, because we are inviting you to join a committed, high-energy group of school owners. You're going to have access to the playbooks and processes that have helped Brooklyn Music Factory grow to 7 figures. The combined wisdom of a coaching team that has decades worth of experience in helping school owners grow. School owners just like you. Support from Daniel and myself while you implement profit-exploding changes in your school. And an insider's look at other schools in our industry. You're going to have access to the pooled knowledge of a group of owners that are going all in on growing their school.
We're going to be releasing more information about this opportunity over the coming months in advance of that November 1st launch date. And if you'd like to be the first in line to join the forum, or you'd just like more information, head over to growyourmusicstudio.com/forum, and let's make this year your best year yet. Again, head over to growyourmusicstudio.com/forum. And if you're listening to this in the future, you can join the second wave of owners by applying at that link. Nate, I've often talked about on the podcast that I honestly felt like I was out of ideas within 10 episodes of beginning this podcast like 2.5 years ago. And then here we are on episode 130 something. Yeah. And every once in a while, I have this thought of how have we not done an episode on this yet? That's one of these episodes. That's what this one is for me. Because there's something that I've observed over the years about you and Brooklyn Music Factory that I think deserves probably multiple episodes, but at the very least, we're going to do this one to talk about branding, design, and how that plays into your strategy.
Nice.
So I'm very excited to get into this conversation with you, Nate. And I know we've talked briefly about this prior to hitting record here. So I think there's going to be some revelations that come out that are shocking to me and the audience as we have this discussion. So you ready to jump into it?
Yeah, love it. I love this topic.
That's awesome. So welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I'm Daniel. This is Nate. And here in the 7 Figure Music School podcast, we are dedicated to helping you run a profitable business that is fun to own. So Nate, getting into this, I will tell you the genesis of how this came about. I was speaking with some clients recently, and they are getting ready to add more programs to their school. And I think they're at an inflection point where it actually makes sense to do that. Not too long ago, maybe a month and a half back, we talked to Sam from Opus One, and he said one of the anti-patterns, one of the anti-success patterns that he sees music schools doing is adding too many programs too fast.
Right.
I don't think that's the case with these clients. They're actually adding these programs at a really good time for them. And a question they had was, do we change the name of the whole school? Do we create these programs under the banner of this school? How should that look? We want to move away from a demographic that we initially targeted and add more, a different demographic group, a different age of kids. in this new
Right.
program that we're doing. And as they were saying this, I was thinking, oh my word, this is exactly what Brooklyn Music Factory does. Now, Nate, I know I've been talking a lot, but I have to say one more thing.
Yeah.
The first time I walked into your new location, um, and many of the people, if you've watched some of our live podcasts over on YouTube, you actually have been able to see the lobby of Brooklyn Music Factory. But the first time I walked into the lobby, there's a big wall right as you come in on the backside
Mm.
of the community room. Sorry, not the lobby, the community room.
Thank you.
Yes, I knew you'd get on me for that. Um, anyway, at on at the top of this wall, there's a number of logos for the different programs that students can take at Brooklyn Music Factory. There's Big Music Games, there's Jam Band 101, there's a logo representing your private lesson program, rock write and record, like all these different programs that you do.
Right.
And one of the things that really has just impressed me is that you have the Brooklyn Music Factory, top level brand, and then you have branded the individual programs that
Right.
kids can take at Brooklyn Music Factory. And I just want to get into it today because I think there is so much here that can be learned by our listeners and watchers over on YouTube. So let me just start with an easy softball over the middle of the plate, Nate.
Okay.
How did you come up with the name Brooklyn Music Factory?
Great. It's actually such a good question because I have so much more to say about deeper topics on sub brands within Brooklyn Music Factory and logos, etc., than I do on the name. The fact is that the name was one of those moments where we needed a name. I knew it wasn't going to be around my name, and I knew I wanted it to be something that could outlast me or my partner Pira whenever that moment came. And so this just it was one of those things where I was like, Brooklyn Music Factory rolls off the tongue, love it. I was in love with where I was living. I was very much a part of the community in our neighborhood and in Brooklyn, and I wanted that to be in the name. I had no idea that Brooklyn itself was going to become this whole like buzzword brand.
Yeah.
So at the time, it wasn't thinking, can I link, you know, Brooklyn into our name? It just felt right to me, so it rolled off, and we went with it. Um, and what's interesting is I didn't we didn't really question it. We just went with it. We're like, this feels good. Let's go with it. So it wasn't a deep sort of purpose, values driven name choice. It just felt really authentic to me at the time and to Pira as well. Um, and the second choice we did right after we made the name is I went to a friend who was a graphic designer who had been doing that his whole career. And I was like, dude, let's start sketching designs.
Mm.
So, we'll get into that in a minute and what he came up with when we're talking about logos and branding and all that stuff. But I would just say around the name, Daniel, we need to be a little careful because we're going to live with this name for a long
Yeah.
time. Right.
Yeah.
So we do want to know that it feels good to us to say over and over to our friends and our family. Because honestly, in the beginning, those are the only people that are going to listen. So we're just like, Brooklyn Music Factory, how does it feel? And they'll give you their honest feedback. But the last person you need to listen to is yourself because you're going to say this so much. You don't want to say, I have a music school. You want to say, I run Brooklyn Music Factory.
Yeah.
Right. So
Mm.
that's it on the name. Felt great,
Yeah.
and we love it to this day.
I have to push in just a little bit here.
Yeah.
Factory. Is there any significance to that word for you?
It's really funny because the initial logo for BMF, you'll see on our website, it's just the name at this angle, etc. But the
Yes.
initial logo actually had a factory behind that nameplate. So it was like nameplate factory in the background, some smoke going up, and we used that for the first couple of years. And we kept trying to drill into this notion of a factory because on the one hand, factory feels actually off-putting, right? As if you were just sort of generating musicians on a like it's a Ford plant, it's a factory line.
Yeah.
That's not at all what we mean by it. Um, but I do think that there's something linked, as we've talked about in many episodes, We did a great episode on sort of the musician's journey report. To us, from the very beginning, baked into our name is this idea that a student's going to come in at a young age and stay with us for a full journey, right? And so in this term factory, I think we also sort of that encompasses this idea that a student's coming into a community and moving through it, and that it's not about the single teacher that's going to take them for 10 years through their journey. It's about coming into this building and knowing that they're going to touch many different teachers and many different programs along the way as they grow, into the songwriter and musician that we hope they'll be 10 years later. So maybe there's something in there with Factory in that regards.
Yeah, I have two thoughts. First, just to briefly touch on something you said there. Episode 29 is the episode in which we talked about the musician's journey report. And I think another episode worth listening to is episode 67, where we talk about the 10-year vision of Brooklyn Music Factory and the vision they lay out for their students.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think both of those we should drop in the show notes if people want to check those out. I'll also take the time to mention that we have created a massive resource recently for those of you who are big fans of the podcast. Our team, our crack team of marketing professionals around here, headed up by Bethany, well, mostly Bethany, created, actually it was completely Bethany. In fact, I just delayed this project forever. She was like getting on my case about it. And she's so good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Anyway, we created a podcast episode guide. We've created a number, like 12.5 categories, and we've categorized all the episodes we've ever released under these categories, and it's selectable in this Google Doc that you can download for free. We'll link that in the show notes as well. We made a blog post around it so that you can go there. You can either download the resource and keep it. We're going to update it every week. So if you have a desire to go back and listen to every episode we've done on, let's say, financial fluency, they're all in one category. You can find those very, very easily. If you want to listen to every episode we've done on hiring or management, our live Q&A episodes, group lessons, like all these different topics that we really focus on in this podcast, we've made a really great resource for you that you can download on the website. So just hit the show notes and you can find that. It's the first, second, and now here's the third thing. I did just want to briefly touch on, I asked the factory question. I want to talk a little bit about Piano Express. When Greg and I came up with that, brand in 2005, there was real thought given to the word express, because deep in the core of our beliefs then and to this day, there was this desire to help kids get through those beginning stages of the skill of learning piano very quickly.
Yep.
There's a joke Greg has always made about me. He says, Daniel, the only thing faster than your driving is how fast you talk. And I've got a video of him me and him in college saying that. That has been kind of a core value, both of ours. We don't want to belabor the point. We don't want kids to just get drugged down and stuck in this quagmire of like going through a method book a year, as often happens to kids at the beginning. And so everything about how that brand has developed over the last 20 years, now culminating grouplessons.com, has been about that. We've never lost that core desire. So there was a real choice in us using the words express. And I have to give more credit to Greg than to myself. And if you go back, we have an early version of the logo as well that doesn't look nearly as good as the current one. And so we've retained that brand over the years, and it's developed and grown. And as we've had more resources, we've hired much better designers to kind of rebrand for us. We just thought I'd mention that there's real power in naming, which I think I'm going to talk about later in the episode. And there's also real power in being so intentional and really getting in touch with what those core values are, so that you create something that's congruent with the vision you have for the students and the business you want to build.
Yeah.
And I'll say, before I kick it back over to you, I'm going to ask you another question in a minute. I do want to say, I don't think I've ever said this to you, Nate. There's such a sophistication to the Brooklyn Music Factory logo. It's such a strong logo. It's not cutesy, like those sorts of things. There's a real, I think, power behind it. But there is that sense of being kind of on the edge, the way that your designer the way that your designer made it was it's I mean, I guess people would have to go look at it, and I'm not sure quite how to put into words what is there, but while it does have like a strong presence, you know, there's just an even how the words are made, you know, like there's like little holes in the finish all
Yeah.
across the logo, you know, kind of giving it an edgy feel, which I love.
You know, I love that you bring that up because he said, I can vividly remember him sending me, and this is a
Mm.
good friend. Like, we still, you know, he and I, we just had beers before I came up to Maine for the summer. And um, he did this really as a solid for me, you know, just to be
Oh, that's
clear
cool.
for all of our listeners. Like, there's a reason why we say friends and family are essential to getting our school scaled in a sustainable way, because oftentimes you're going to lean on those friends that are that frankly you can't afford, you know, to help you with
Mm.
essential parts of your business in the early stages. And so he gave me a folder full of logos, and I remember him talking with such intention around every artistic choice he made with each
Yeah.
logo. And there was a bunch that I was like, nope, that looks way too modern. That's not who we are, etc. But you made such a good point with the Piano Express name and then your logo, which is you highlighted two essential um, aspects of what you were creating. Number one, the age range of who you really wanted to serve well. So you have this in your logo, you can see that it is targeted in a way towards younger pianists, right? Like,
Hmm.
so, and number two, that I've heard you say so many times, separate from Piano Express, baked into your own values
Yeah.
and methodology as a teacher, that you really, really valued and saw results when you moved those younger students quickly in the
Yeah.
very beginning, like you talk off. So, well, we don't have to go into it because we talked about it a lot, but I just want to say that um, this goes hand in hand with my earliest comment, which is you're going to live with this name and this brand for the rest of the company's life. So you really want to be specific on this, why we talk about purpose and values so much. Because if you grab somebody else's idea of a great name and a great logo and just say, well, that seems like it'll work, then you've missed the essential component, which is that it's coming from you in a really authentic place. And you're not going to be able to authentically promote this brand um, if you if you don't believe in it, and if it doesn't align with the purpose and the values behind why you started the company in the first place. Um, I want to get back to your question then on the angularity of the word. So if you look at the Brooklyn Music Factory logo, you'll see it's at an angle, and then even the edges of like the Y on factory and the N are cut off, and the B is cut off on the edges. And music is the largest sized word in the middle. And no matter how you try to place the logo, it always feels slightly off, which
Mm.
is fascinating to me. And I love that piece. Why?
Mhm.
Because foundationally for us, we are all about gamifying the lesson plan. That's the inspiring musicians part of our tagline. And so we want people that are attracted to a brand where they say, this definitely feels different. I can't quite put my finger on why, but I know it's a little different, right? It's so
Mm.
radically different than the clean and precise brand or logo, for example, of a conservatory,
Yeah.
right? And so for us, we were like, when we say gamification of the lessons, what we really mean is an alternative approach, sort of the
Oh,
side entrance into education. So we want parents to be attracted to this idea of, well, this feels a little different than what I was expecting. I think my family is going to be better served in a community where it just feels a little bit different, right? A little bit off from the traditional approach.
yeah.
So just wanted to point that out. So when we were making the choice on the logo, Daniel, I was totally like, no, 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 yes, let's develop this one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I'll just add one or two small things in here. If you would like to hear an episode where I go on at length about the connection between the values
Mm.
and and how the values that you hold can lead to long-term retention in your school, go back and check out what I think is an underrated episode. It's episode 24. Um, a lot of our early episodes have massive download numbers now just because they've been around for a couple years. But I've
Right.
always felt that that's I feel like one of the best episodes that we've recorded in the early days. But maybe it just needs to be retitled or something. But it doesn't have quite as many downloads. But I actually think it's one of our best in the first 50. Um,
Nice.
so yeah, check that out. So yeah, I definitely recommend you check out that episode. So Nate, I actually want to move from the master brand of BMF to the sub brand because again, going back to what Sam from Opus One said, you shouldn't have too many programs like that sort of thing. But over the years, BMF has run out or has rolled out a number of programs, and I'm curious, what was the strategy there? Was that planned from the beginning? Did that happen organically? How did you choose the look? I have so many questions. Where do you want to start with this?
Um, I kind of want to start with the story of our early
Ooh,
attempts and then
love
how
it.
we developed. I would just say how we matured and became wiser over the years. Um, our very first, we had private lessons. I'm sure we just called them private lessons. We weren't hip enough to call it the songwriter's journey or anything like that. It was just private lessons. And then in the beginning, I taught every band. It was Saturdays. We rented out this dance studio, and I just taught from like 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. back to back. And every band had a different um, name, and it was based entirely on the genre of music that we were going to cover. So we had like big city country, and we were writing country songs, and we were doing Hank Williams senior covers. And we had, the Atlantic Avenue Soul Review, named after the big avenue that's like 4 blocks from the location. We had, we had, uh, what was it? Uh, we had a great name for the Barry Manilow band, like barely Manilow or something like that. And so we just we just like coming up.
That's
We were
hilarious.
coming up. We had all these great names for each type of music that we wanted to do, and the reality is we just thought it was really fun to come up with names for the different bands, but we weren't actually really focused on what we were going to be long term. We just knew that we wanted to get kids together to play. And so I was coming up with these creative or clever names in hopes that it would convince a parent to, fill out the form and enroll. Um, and the reality is, like, nobody signed up for the Barry Manilow band, like zero. We had a bunch of parents that were into country, so they signed up for big city country. But it was just like one of these things where you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall. You're like,
Yeah.
whatever we can possibly do to try to get anybody to enroll. And so I sort of bring that up to just say, um, if you're in the first year, 2, 3 of your program and you're just testing out ideas, this may feel like it's contradicting what Daniel and I just said about being really intentional about your name and your initial logo. But we're not actually. That name and initial logo, you do want to be patient with it and you do want to take your time. But as you begin to roll out what you're going to offer, if you're going to come up with a creative name for your private lesson program or your different group class program, I think that absolutely warrants testing and just seeing, because you're still discovering who you are. You're in the young early stages as a company. So, anyways, that was our initial group class program. And then quickly thereafter, we just scrapped all of those names and we came up with Rock, Write, and Record. Because basically, we were establishing for our group programs, listen, we're a pop music program, hence the rock. You're going to write music, right? We're a songwriting program. We were still in the early stages of being able to do that really well, but we knew we wanted to be a songwriting program. And we're going to document and share. That's the record piece. So Rock, Write, and Record became our first real brand that we were putting it out there. And then shortly thereafter, when we started rolling out our camps, which has become like a really important and significant part of our business, which was led by Pira, we simply called it the Rock, Write, and Record Camp. It was just, and which eventually that brand turned into even simpler, which was just a songwriting camp, right? Which is how we brand it now. So that was really the first product. We had private lessons and we had Rock, Write, and Record. From there, what happened over the years, Daniel, is that essentially we started looking at what age range we wanted to serve, and what age range people the market was asking us to serve. Right. So those are two pieces. Where did we have real, genuine interest in developing curriculum and developing something that we could promise and deliver on? So that's where's your creative and intellectual capacity? That part's huge. You don't want to. That's getting back to Sam's comment. In our very first year at BMF, we offered lessons in every single instrument, and that was a complete train wreck. I was like, wait, I need to go find a trombone teacher for one student. And that just was, as we all know, that's a crush. That is not an approach to growing a profitable school. You want to focus on where you have, both creative, intellectual capacity to grow, where you're going to actually be able to promise something and deliver on it, and then attract teachers that are going to follow that. So number one, there's that. But then number two, of course, you're also balancing that, Daniel, with what is the market asking for?
Yes.
Right? Like,
I love that.
Yeah, I know you dig that. And so the market was asking us to create programs for younger musicians, right? And so we essentially started asking ourselves, okay, we have this Rock, Write, and Record. It's very clear that if you're the parent of like a 5-year-old, you're like, I don't understand how my child is going to be able to write songs, record it, and be able to gig, because that's not actually age appropriate, right?
Yeah.
So we started working backwards and being like, okay, what program is going to feed into Rock, Write, and Record? Okay, that's where we came up with Jam Band 101. So it's a jam band. To us, that felt more age appropriate in branding, name, and the logo didn't look as mature as the Rock, Write, and Record logo did. The Rock, Write, and Record logo highlighted, a microphone on a stand, a guitar. It looked much more like a rock and roll logo might. It was baked into a big guitar pick.
Yeah.
The Jam Band 101 just felt, frankly, more fun. The edges were soft. It felt like, as a parent, you could imagine your kid joining that.
Yes.
Right. And so when we're talking about branding and we're talking about naming, so we're taking a name and then we're making a graphic representation of that name that we can basically put on tattoos, stickers, the website, anywhere you can possibly slap it, right? You're thinking always about who you're serving. You're thinking about that purpose and values piece we've already talked about. So for at Brooklyn Music Factory, it was, we always knew we were going to be a school that was building community. We were going to be an inclusive school, not an exclusive school. And that's a really important differentiator, because we definitely have listeners here that are much more of an exclusive academy, a very specific type of level musician that they want to serve, right? At Brooklyn Music Factory, we're a songwriting program. We believe everybody has a story to put into a song and can do it collaboratively. Jeez, that's a hard word. Do it in collaboration with others. So the Jam Band 101 logo is meant to be inviting to anyone who wants to come explore instruments and write songs together on that. From there, we have even younger, serving ages 4 and 5, the mini keys, right? And basically that's a play on mini me's. We just put mini keys. And so we focus primarily on the microphone, the keyboard, and the boom, crack, floor tom, and a snare. Those are the three instruments. But the mini keys, a little micro keyboard, is in the logo. And there's no parent that doesn't think and hasn't seen their child when they walk up to see a piano, be willing to walk up and poke at the keys, right? Everybody, every parent's like, oh, my kid can totally poke around on a keyboard. So it's an inviting logo. It's age appropriate. Again, it's an inclusive logo. It's not meant to be an exclusive logo. The keyboard looks fun, almost looks like a toy.
Hey, so if you've been enjoying this episode about branding, I have a thought for you. It took both Nate and myself many, many years to come up with these products, these programs within our music schools that were so powerful to us, and the amount of time and effort and innovative thought that it took, especially for Nate, to create all these programs. Maybe it's not something that you want to have to spend the next decade doing yourself. And if that's the case, there are some programs that you can plug and play right into your school that have those powerful brand identifiers that we've been talking about, we'll continue to talk about in this episode. And that happens to be the two sponsors of this podcast, which is Big Music Games, one of those programs we've been talking about at BMF, and the Piano Express. Big Music Games is a web app for kids ages 4 to 14. It helps them level up their music knowledge through proven games created by actual music teachers. If you want to check out that product from Brooklyn Music Factory, just go to bigmusicgames.com/7FMS. And if you want a group lesson program that can greatly increase the margins in your school, check out grouplessons.com. And if you'd like a free demo and to even look into our teacher guides, get a sample of our owner training for free, just go to grouplessons.com/demo. So let's head back to the episode. You know, in a roundabout way, you answered the very simple question that I asked, which was this pre-planned or did it happen organically? And I think everything you've just said is so helpful, because one of the very earliest episodes we did, we talked about, you know, vision and how you need to get your journal out and what's important to you. And you told a story about how your family played music together, and that's really one of the core values. And for years, owners have come back to us and asked very high level, and I'm not being insulting here, but like very high level kind of basic questions about, well, how do I do that? I think what you've just said there will at least demonstrate for people kind of the process that you can go about doing just that. And I think is really maybe the best answer to that question that people have. Like, well, how do I come up with my own thing? Like, just listen to what Nate said. Go back 10 minutes and just listen to that again. Then just see how this developed organically, and how they responded to what the community wanted. And then other programs were created to help prepare kids for the program that they were going to go into next. And so there was kind of an overall brand strategy, which we're going to get into in a minute, and an overall product strategy that kind of went side by side. Okay. That's the first thing. Second thing, I have to drop this in here now. I knew I wanted to talk about this somewhere, and this is the perfect place to do it. One of the biggest influences on me when it comes to business, or at least one of the earliest influences I had in kind of the second phase of my career, which really became more about just my studio, but then helping other studio owners, right? One of those earliest influences was a guy named Eben Pagan. Not Evan, but Eben, E-B-E-N, very strange name. And I will call him like a grandfather of internet marketing. He was building internet brands in the late 90s. Back when we were still most of us were all still on dial-up, you know. And he has built 10 different online brands to at least $10 million. And 2 of those brands he built to over 50 million in sales. This guy knew what he was doing. And this was back in the days when people were still afraid to put their credit card on a website, you know. He managed to do this during that time. He made a training in 2006, I think it was, where he explained how he and his team did this. And during that training, which I took in the early 2010s, he had a whole section on the power of a name. And actually, they've released for free part of that training on YouTube now. And if you go to YouTube, and we'll probably put this in the show notes, but if you don't go to the show notes, you just go to YouTube, just type in Eben Pagan. I think it's like the psychology of a name your customers can't forget. I think that's the name of the video. It's like 10, 11 minutes long. This was so powerful to me. And a lot of the products that Grow has made have been greatly influenced by the full length of this training. This is what you'll see on YouTube is only a small part of it. But like we have Scale Your Studio, Music School Marketing System, Successful Group Lessons, Studio Marketing Masterclass. There are principles that he taught in this that I spent months sometimes on names for Grow Your Music Studio. These sub brands that we have in this business. And Nate, it's so evident in what you've done, like all the thought that you've put into it. And even though I know you didn't take that training, I've always been impressed with the names that you came up for your sub brands, your programs, because they actually follow a lot of the principles that he talks about. And I don't think it's an accident that you've had the kind of success that you've had, because either by just raw talent, you just intuitively knew that these things should be there. Oh no, give yourself credit, Nate.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. But I just think it's there. But I really think for people that are trying to build out a product line in their school, or they want to provide some wind in the sails of their school, consider not just having a private lesson program. Consider not just having, oh, these are our guitar lessons. Oh, this is our group lesson program. Name it. And if you do, at the very least, go and listen to this video and understand why it's really important not just to have like a humdrum name that 1,000 other schools could have, but to come up with something really unique, because he gets into all the psychological reasons why just naming something automatically elevates it, can cause you to have better sales for that product, be able to charge more for that product, have more subconscious respect from your customers, not conscious, but subconscious respect from your customers, your clients, simply by naming stuff. So this video, I think, is absolutely crucial for people to listen to, even if you don't have like this giant product line already, or even if you're hearing this like, yeah, I don't even know if I want a product strategy. Like, at least consider listening to this and think about the opportunity you have to just even name simple things in your studio.
I remember seeing I think Tim Topham had a really nice post like a decade ago that I read that was on creating, and it was based on this elementary school teacher that everybody loved, creating a unique handshake for each one of your students. So when I have one of my students, Kenta, got way into the Rubik's Cube and could solve it in under 60 seconds without looking. So now his name is Speed Cube. And Otis just loves melodies. So now his name is Melodis.
I love that.
When you create these nicknames, all of a sudden there's an immediate commitment to them and a deepening of the relationship. And the thing is that the parent, in the case of this example, like coming up with a nickname for your student, the parent sees that as you being committed to them and treating them as the unique being that they are, right? Which is exactly why we need to heed your advice, Daniel, of making your program the unique being that it is by naming it. It also sets you as an owner up to be a hella more accountable to what you're promising, right? So we say it's
100%.
mini keys. We don't say it's a music lesson for 4-year-olds. We say it's mini keys, and that whole curriculum is every single week of the 15-week curriculum that's designed has a promise linked to it that's linked to this idea that it's an exploration band, that your child's going to get their hands on all the instruments. It's like equal opportunity jam, band, that they're going to write a song, that they're going to learn how to work with one another. All of these things are baked into the mini keys promise and the brand and the logo. So I just think it's a beautiful idea, Daniel. Like this, definitely. I'm going to go back and actually watch this Eben Pagan video on YouTube. So it just occurs to me that like we're committing all the time by naming things. So why are we not doing that in our business with our product suite? You know?
Yeah, 100%. Maybe as we kind of go into the close here, start wrapping up, I would ask you, um, you know what? I'm going to ask this in two ways. I'm going to ask the same question, but from two different viewpoints. If you were going to give advice to a school that had aspirations to create sub brands, what advice would you give? Or to ask it a different way, what one thing would you do differently if you had a time machine and could go back 10 years as it pertains to the programs that BMF runs? What would you do differently? So same idea, but from two different viewpoints.
Okay. Stellar question. Let's go back in a time machine.
Okay.
Let's go back to when I had all of these band names based on genres of music that I happened to be interested in. I wasn't that interested in Barry Manilow, but I really love the name Barely Manilow.
Barely Manilow? That's so brilliant.
Oh, my word. I would say you're not trying to be clever, right? What you're trying to do is find the thing that you truly want to commit to and have a name and a brand around that you can then refine as you get better in your teaching and methodology and whatever. Like when someone licensing it, like let's go to Piano Express again. When you license Piano Express, one of the beautiful things about doing that is that you actually adopt the brand. And all you need to do is ensure that that their purpose aligns with your purpose, right? And that obviously that it's going to make you money, that it's going to be a wise business choice. But if it aligns, then you already adopt a well-conceived brand, right? You get the name, you get the look, feel, everything. You can just plug that onto your site and you're good, right? But if I were to go back, I would say I would have loved to have just had a single program name for my group classes for the bands rather than a bunch of different names like Big City Country, Atlantic Avenue Soul Review. Because the truth is now, 15 years later, Daniel, none of those programs exist, right? Rock, Write, and Record exists. Mini Keys exists. Jam Band 101. And it's not to say that I didn't love Big City Country because they were an amazing band. At one point, Big City Country had the opportunity to play with David Byrne from the Talking Heads. It was like an amazing group.
Impressive.
Like they were doing all kinds of cool gigs. Like from the outside, people were like, that's so impressive. And they really sounded good. And they were just beautiful songwriters and creatives. And they continue to be that. But from the inside, it was causing chaos because it was like a distraction. It was it was an awesome thing, but we were like, okay, so are we a country music program or are we a soul, are we an R&B program with the Atlantic Avenue Soul Review, which was another one of the bands that was really popular. It was ending up sort of splintering all of our focus, right? So that's what I would do in the beginning. I would say, no, just keep it simple. Like follow the Sam advice from that previous episode we referenced and just be like, you know what? I'm going to do this thing and this thing really well. And I'm going to take the time to name and brand that. We have gone through probably 3 iterations of what the logo looks like for Rock, Write, and Record, what the logo looks like for Jam Band 101, for Mini Keys. So it's totally normal and okay for you to refine and revise the logo as you get more and more clear on precisely who you're going to serve and how you're going to serve them, right? Also, sometimes you're just like, it needs a refresher. Like this looks dated. The FedEx logo doesn't look dated. But I was just thinking about this as I was driving by. I was in Canada on vacation recently, and I was looking at the Tim Horton logo, which is their, they got bought by Wendy's, whatever, like 5 years ago or something, and their logo went through a refresh because it just frankly looked dated. The same thing happened with Kentucky Fried Chicken. It became KFC, and it became a refresh and a modern look and feel. Dunkin' Donuts is like probably the most famous brand refresh that you notice now. You just can't even remember the old Dunkin' Donuts logo, but they actually totally changed it in the last, like when they started leaning heavily on influencers to sell their product,
Yeah.
right? They just
Yeah.
did a refresh on the brand and it looks updated. So, that's normal, I would say. So don't get stuck on the idea of having to be perfect. Definitely don't let perfectionism get in the way of you committing to some kind of graphic and name. And like we said, naming your program and putting that on your website, making stickers, making some tattoos, making a banner, putting a decal on the window. Don't let that hold you up.
100%. I'm going to tell a brief story here before we kind of outro. My
Cool.
very first logo for my private studio was a piece of clip art that I'd used in college when making for an assignment that I had for my music education degree. And I still kind of use it to this day. It's this little Beethoven looking guy cartoon. You've probably seen it, Nate.
Yeah.
Obviously I don't use it anymore, but I use that for my studio. And I don't recommend anyone go use clip art. What I might recommend, hey, it was fine for a 22-year-old. One of the things I think people should have an experience of at least sometime in their life if they own a business is actually working with a professional designer. And I've done this
Yeah.
a number of times now for a number of different logos that over different businesses that I have. There's it's a very interesting process. If you've never gone through it before, these designers will ask you all kinds of questions about your values, and they'll really draw things out of you. They'll send you these massive questionnaires, and then they'll come back with their version, their of what they heard in visual format. And it's kind of like what Nate was describing there at the beginning. If you were kind of fascinated as he talked about why the B is cut off and why it's on a slant, that is the hallmark of a really good designer. And I've worked with good designers for a number of either rebrands or the origination of a brand. And then sometimes we've done things in-house for things that we're just like, hey, let's get this out quickly. And I know that some of the people that we work with internally that are good, have that eye for design and kind of a background for that. We've been more than happy with stuff that has happened internally or where we haven't worked with like a major design agency or something like that.
Well, and Daniel,
So,
I just like,
yeah.
I love that idea. And I just quickly pulled up 99 Designs to be like, well, what does it cost right now to get a logo done? It's $239. So, like we oftentimes talk about,
Yeah.
that is worth the money just for you to grow and mature as a business owner by going through the process of what you're describing, Daniel.
Yes.
Like having to
Now,
get it wrong and then right and then wrong and then
yeah.
right. That's worth $239.
Yeah. Now I will say, having used 99 Designs before, and I'm not about ready to say, but no, I'm going to actually agree with you. Having used it, that's a starting point for something very, very basic.
Yeah.
We've spent thousands of dollars on a logo and brand identity before. So it can get up there if you're wanting something more robust and to like get into the depths of like how Nate had BMF's logo designed. Which I think, Nate, you said earlier in the episode, it was a friend kind of doing a favor. If you'd had to pay for what he put you through, it would have been thousands
Yeah.
upon thousands
I
of
think we
dollars.
paid, this was 15 years ago, and I think we paid him $1,000 or $2,000, which I'm sure was a
Yeah.
fraction of his fee. But
Yeah.
still, it was a lot of money for me at the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
for us starting the
Yeah.
company. Can I make one other highlight based on your last comment, which is
Sure.
when you do go through the process of working with a pro and you end up with a number of graphic assets. And
Yes.
so BMF now does, to your comment about in-house design, most of our work now, when anything we're designing, like for a poster or blah blah blah, any sort of like an event, something happening, one of our community concerts, we do all of that in-house in Canva. Right. And the
Yeah.
reason why I have confidence that we can do it in-house in Canva is because at one point in time, we actually invested the time and money into creating a style guide and a whole series of
Yes.
assets. So we had a
Mm-hmm.
font, we had our color palette, we had our specific assets, like if you're going to use, here are all the different versions of the logo, here's a background, blah, blah, blah. So once you put together a 1.0 of that folder, then you can just subscribe to something really affordable like a Canva and start designing a lot of your things within that. And what's beautiful about that is then you have a consistent look and feel. Like
Crucial.
Crucial. And we're not even talking about the why behind branding. We don't even have time to get into the why right now.
100%.
But let's just highlight the fact that the most fundamental use you get out of branding and naming is you build trust. Because we all know what it's like to have a totally random brand experience with a business that we're trying to buy from. And we don't know whether we were on one website page and it looks and feels like us, so we feel confident and trust that we should buy from them. Then we click to an interior page and it doesn't look and feel at all like the home page. And we're like, wait, hold on. Maybe this isn't the right place for me to buy. So when we do branding and we do naming and we get that consistent look and feel across all of our products, your private lessons, your group classes, your concerts, etc., anything you're doing, your recitals, what you're doing is you're telling your families that you have a very specific purpose behind each one of these products, and it feels connected because it looks connected.